has been the golf course superintendent at Mountain Branch Golf Club in Joppa, Maryland for the past 13 years, and in Turfgrass management for 23 years. Originally from Idaho, Logan received an undergraduate degree in environmental and occupational safety and health from Boise State University, and once moving to Maryland, received a master's in applied turfgrass management from Penn State University. Logan has taken his passion for all things turfgrass into the equine world, where he is the current senior sports turf consultant for the Maryland Jockey Club, helping oversee the turf tracks at Laurel Park and Pimlico. So without further ado,
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Mine will be much more casual. I don't do this for a living per se, so feel free to interrupt me as needed with questions or whatever. But my talk's gonna pretty much utilize everything that Jeff said. The basics, how we actually apply those into the racing world with my work at Maryland Jockey Club, so Pimlico and Laurel. I'm also just began some work down at Gulfstream Park where they're renovating the turf track. So I'm, going to be applying these similar practices down there. The racing world in general is exciting to say the least. Extremely scary and challenging because, as people in this room, livelihoods are invested in this. And so I take what I'm doing extremely serious. And, by utilizing these practices that we'll talk about here, I know that I'm giving the best possible, course conditions that we're able. So hopefully let's get into this here and see. Oh, trying to go the other direction. All right, so let's start off just here by, what are the goals, right? Number one goal of all this is safety. We don't do anything to compromise safety. And when you have, in sports turf in general, it's, oh man, we don't want our quarterback to blow his knee out, right? Be out a year. Well, what I'm doing here and helping what we're dealing with is literally life and death potential, right? Both equine and human. So it's a different level. So we see, we take that number one. Now, number two here, we're going to do these things so that the turf recovers after we race on it. It doesn't matter if you're into cross country or, you've got jumpers or whatever that's on turf, or we're racing around a 7/8 of a mile turf course. We need that turf to recover, because if it is not effectively recovering, won't be long. We're going to be leading into safety issues. We want longevity. So if you're looking at 17 acres of turf, which is Laurel, Pimlico's 8 acres, you can't just re-sod this, right? Without a huge undertaking to just throw new sod down. So we need that turf to be able to stick around, recover, and be established for a long period of time. And then way down, I should probably have way down here would be aesthetics, because it's nice to look at green grass, right? So, I get, if the turf doesn't look good, you're more likely to get calls saying, man, the turf looks horrible. That call is more likely to happen than, we haven't had, knock on wood, any equine injuries in a while. So number one up there is safety. Down the road, man, turf looks beautiful. That's what been getting the last, year or so has been, we have some of the best looking turf in the country. So how do we kind of do that? A little bit of background here. The way I work, and some of this will be, is my approach, is that we're going to look at the soil. We're going to focus on the soil because 99% of what's happening is starting there. So my kind of approach here is like that soil first approach. What can we do to get the microbiology in the soil going, get the roots developing? Because if we're doing that, then recovery and turf health and beauty and all that stuff just falls into line. So, some of the points here, that Jeff talked about, that we'll be putting into practice, like the aerification, the fertilizing, going a little bit step farther than just NPK, but what can we do for microbial nutrition? How can we get that stuff underground that we don't see to be working for us so that these soils can work for us and aid us in this recovery and not against us? Seeding. We can talk a little bit about these dual systems of, warm season, cool season. And if we were in a room of turf people, it could be a very heated conversation because some people think, oh yeah, that's the way to go. That has great potential. And others say, how do you manage two complete different systems that need two different things at 10 different times in a year? So it's very interesting. And Jeff and I have talked with the Equine Sports Turf Alliance is like looking at these combinations. Like how can we get some federal funding to look into what we call in the industry blue muta. So it's a Bermuda grass base with bluegrass seeded in. And you're trying to time when this one's doing great, this one's off, and this one's they kind of switch. But it's not easy. And so, Jeff's got some cool looking research coming up, potential with the tall fescue introduction in there, which is going to be really neat. And there's an equine position for that, which, of course, I'm excited about. Just general pest management, I'm not going to get into that. One thing that we will really get into is that if the healthier your turf stand, the less you got to manage the pests. So that's how you look at it. Watering, I understand a lot of farms, a lot of situations, watering is just Mother Nature. It's not an option. So there are some things that maybe we could use in, maybe certain areas, say you're cross country, you got jumps or whatever. Maybe we can do some things like get the landing and the takeoff to aid in those sorts of things. Mowing, how do we go about mowing? We'll talk about high to cut. And then some tools that we use. I'll go here, I'll go into what that is, but this is the next level that we're doing. And then just like some general practices that we started doing at the Jockey Club and things of that nature. So Jeff can tell you that photosynthesis, anyone that took biology, cellular respiration, the carbon cycle, literally entire semester spent on breaking these processes down. So, they're relatively simple. So, right, photosynthesis, taking energy from the sun and the grass is going to convert it and use, make energy for growth and to build things and build roots. And in turn, feed microbes that work hand in hand. And then at night, the system's going to kind of switch and all the carbohydrates and everything that were built during the day are going to then be consumed. And so, in the carbon cycle here, obviously, on the pasture ground, you have a big horse, not a cow, standing there returning some carbon. But this whole thing works together, this whole process. So my approach is a carbon-based fertility approach. So I'm really focused in this carbon cycle and trying to, promote this cycle as a whole and then have good benefits in return. Aerification. So what are we doing really with aerification? One thing that we're really doing, prioritizing the roots. Here's that thatch layer. We play a game of too much thatch, not enough thatch. How do we manage this thatch layer? And one way that we can really do that is through aerification. Once again, this soil first, you look at the ground and you don't see the soil, but there's so many things are needed there. In order to survive and thrive, as Jeff was saying with the aerobic microbes, they have to have oxygen. And so the roots need oxygen, the microbes that live down there need oxygen. You can kind of see in the picture here that if we have this big thatch layer, then we're going to end up with shallow roots. If the soil's compacted, it's real hard under hoof or whatever, or just time. You have constant gravity pulling down on the soil, so it just gets hard over time. When we aerify, we poke a hole and we can once again talk 6 hours on different aerification practices. The general one you see is like you rent the one for your home lawn that pulls a little dog, dog turds or whatever you want to call them out of ground. They're all over your yard. And, but there's also solid tines and there's different practices. And when you get into high-end sports turf, you're utilizing them all. As was mentioned, we don't just want to punch all day, every day at this height. Because it will get a hard pan. If you can imagine something comes down and stops at the exact same height, then that is like you're punching that same height and you will get a hard pan later. So It doesn't mean you got to aerify and do these complex things every, 4 months, right? But maybe once every 2 years, you have a company come out and hammer a 16-inch tine in the ground or an 8-inch tine in the ground. And then in general, you're just, oh, well, I can do it with my lawn tractor. I can pull behind a, one that gives me a 3-inch. Like, that's totally fine. It's just a matter of finding out what works for you. But when we do all this right, we end up with deeper roots and, instead of having 3 plants here, we might have 20 in their spot. So that's kind of where we play with this and what aerification does. It allows these nutrients to get in there. When you, one thing a lot of people don't understand about thatch is this. It'll absorb an uncanny amount of water. It's hard to describe. You got an inch of thatch in there, you can put hundreds of gallons of it, and it'll just absorb like a giant sponge before it even gets down into the soil where you want it. And when that happens, all the nutrients you're putting those fertilizer down are also getting hung up there. So if everything's hung up right there, what's your grass going to want to do? I'm not going to drive roots past that. Everything I need is right here in this top 1 inch. Well, that's an issue, right, when it comes to footing and to overall health. And then when the, thatch layer dries out during a drought, we're losing roots right up to that level. And then we got to regenerate them and try to do that, all that extra work, and all that requires time. And when you're in a situation of, racing horses on something, you don't always have time on your side. So, this is all part of that process of not going real far one direction and having to come back and just do the best you can. So healthy, consistent turf, right, that recovers. That's what we're trying to do here. How are we going to get that with fertility? The first thing we're going to do is soil tests. You have to know kind of what is there. Now you can get real technical in soil tests. At the racetracks, we're pulling samples that tell us what's in the soil, but we're also running tests that tell us in solution what's available to the plant. Because a lot of the soils around here will have enough phosphorus. We can debate nutrient management laws all day long as well, but it might say you don't need to add phosphorus, you're totally good. But when I run other tests, I realize that phosphorus is bound up and it's not even really usable by the plant. So, that's when I battle state people and I say it's not, there's phosphorus here, but my plant's starving. And phosphorus is the energy molecule. Like, you need phosphorus in order to have good energy for the plant to do its things, to drive roots, to recover as well and stuff. So, but at these soil tests, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at like 10 things, and then we'll look at pH and be like, all right, are these adjustments? What do we need for pH? Most soils around here that we have, like the golf course that I have, like if you step in the mud and it sticks to your boots and weighs like 1,000 pounds by the time you get away, your boots are stuck, your soil probably has a super high amount of magnesium, right? That's one of the binding agents that makes that. So one way we might address that, high calcium liming. And this is a process that takes time. It doesn't just change instantly, but it's kind of how it works. We'll do when it comes to nutrition, and we kind of have to just, disclaimer here. When I talk about this stuff on the racetrack, I have the ability to apply granular as well as spray nutrition, liquid fertilizers and stuff of that nature over the top as well. You might not have that in all your things, but that doesn't mean that, we can't still do this sort of stuff. Biostimulants. So biostimulants might not have an actual NPK value to them, but what they are is simply that. They stimulate the biology. A lot of times they'll get the plant to activate its self-defense mechanisms and aid in stress recovery. So these are very big. These are big components that we've added a lot to in the fertility plan at the tracks. The ultimate goal here is to, when we look at these soil tests, when we see the soil chemistry, we need to balance that as best we can. It's not good to have too much of this and none of this or a lot, so how can we make small adjustments over time to get things to where they're going to work better? Like, the mud's sticking to your boots and you have too much magnesium, then you can do some high cal liming, and we're going to work on that sort of stuff and aerification and just try to get this soil healthy overall. But it's one thing important to keep in mind that these are moving targets. So I don't take a soil sample today and I'm good for the next 5 years, and I'm going to go because my soil is going to be changing with weather, moisture, and everything. So this is a commitment over time that we're going to need to be, focused on. When it comes to seeding, as we discussed here, Jeff did a great point of mentioning the need for, you want to buy seed that'll grow in your area you're planting. So we'll talk here later, kind of some case studies of a reseeding that we did at Pimlico a couple years ago, and what went into getting that seed and why I selected the seed that I selected. But really, high quality seed is important. Normally, if you buy a cheap bag of seed at Home Depot, half the varieties in there probably won't even grow in Maryland because they're making it for every one of their stores, right? You buy a cheap Scotch brand, is it made for Maryland transition zone, which, as said, that we can equally grow all grasses poorly here. It's just a brutal climate to grow grass. Cool season grass doesn't love our summers. Warm season grass doesn't love our winters. And so, that's where the dual system, turf system, is really like, hey, when we grow both, we could, in all honesty, we could probably both grow both equally poorly in that situation. So, timing when it comes to seed, right now, is a great time. September. When you have soil temperature, but we see this week there's 90 plus degrees coming, right? That's tough on seedlings that are this tall, especially if you can't apply water, over the top with irrigation. So, when I seed, I typically like to do it end of September. There's a couple reasons there. Normally you get a little bit better, cooler days, you get a little bit more moisture, but the disease pressure for new seedlings drops as the temperature drops also. In a world where, my main day job, I'm growing perennial ryegrass on 30 acres worth of fairways at the golf course, it can really be damaged by gray leaf spot. Well, as we get later in the year, that pressure declines, especially seedlings. That pressure goes down. So then I'm not having to spray fungicides and all that sort of stuff. And it just gives it a better chance. So you're kind of looking at that whole thing. It really comes down to that proper preparation and management. You don't necessarily want to go, I'm going to seed my entire pasture tomorrow. You want to think. You need to have that game plan of my soil test. Do I need to line? What am I doing fertility-wise? At the racetracks, we're always thinking about that. We just did heavy seeding at Laurel. So we stepped away from racing at Laurel. We're racing at Timonium, and then we're going to go to Pimlico. And during that time, we did heavy aerification and seeding. Perfect timing for trying to grow seedlings when it's going to be 90 plus degrees. So, luckily we have supplemental irrigation to grow at the top. It's going to be a challenge. But once again, everything that we've done with the fertility and the soil working for us, the chances are even better that we're going to be all right. Pest management here, there are turf diseases, and when you start pushing turf to its brink, to its breaking point, these turf diseases, the weeds, the insects become a bigger component of your worry and your management plans. As I say here, as overall turf health increases, the need for these supplemental things will usually decrease. If I'm growing turf at Laurel Park and Pimlico at 5 inches tall, my weed pressure is lower because the turf's just taller and kind of struggle, can outcompete the dandelions and the weeds, for the most part. So maybe you got to spray once a year, instead of multiple times a year. If I'm growing turf on a golf course at half inch tall, there's more voids, there's more space for these pressures to increase. Insect-wise, at the racetracks, really the biggest thing that we deal with would be like grubs. We would look to control white grubs because we can't have the root structure being, damaged. It's just not something we can tolerate. If it's your pasture ground or something of that nature, might be totally fine. You don't have horses running 30 plus miles an hour needing footing, right? So it'd be totally acceptable. Same with turf diseases. One good thing about turf is it wants to die routinely in this environment, but it also wants to recover. So it might look poor, but if you have time, it'll come back. Not necessarily the same desirable variety or species that you need. It might be POA or something that is like considered a weed in some environments. But if you have time and are willing to just kind of be like, oh, that looks bad for a little bit, then it's okay. And if the racetracks, we do have a spray program to help eliminate turf diseases. And when I talk a little bit here about our varieties of what we chose and why, we'll discuss that as well. When it comes to watering, right, most people know this, deep and infrequent is the way to go. And that's not always easy. That can be a real challenge if it takes you 15 hours to water. It's harder to water heavy enough over 15 hours, than it is if you can I can water everything in 3 hours, 2 hours. Or if you got one pasture section that has irrigation that you really want to keep nice for some reason, and you can water it heavy and then only water it once a week, or you'll be fine. The issue becomes with, I got to move the pipe, or, at the racetrack, it takes us, it's not easy necessarily like at Pimlico to just put an inch worth of water down. It takes a long time. So we got to break that into multiple days in order to get there. In a dream world, I'd put an inch down in one day and be like, we're good to go. We're not watering for the next 5 or 6. But that's not always the case. So we use things to help us in the sports turf world, and things like surfactants. These are products that kind of simply put would almost be like a soap material, but they're far more complex than that. There's 10,000 different options. But what these may do is help the water get into the soil, especially if you have thatch. It can help break the surface tension down on the water. So it wiggles through these holes, and it helps it get into these locations, these smaller little voids, much easier. It might also help it hold in there. So say, one thing that we do at the racetrack is I usually want the water to go away. That's usually how I approach this. And that you've seen, if you're into the racing scene, you've seen kind of some of these benefits of, wow, it rained a half inch yesterday, but we're racing. And the reason why is this water is starting to be able to get down out of the profile or to a manageable level where we can safely run. If it just holds there, we might not be able to safely run for 2-3 days. So we're using these extra step products to do this. If you're doing jumps or whatever, and the landing in your footing area is like, man, it's going to rain, you might be able to apply these in those locations to help that water. If it's a polo field and you're like, if it's wet, we're going to super tear it up, we need to get this water moving through there, then you can do these. Or if it's a sand-based profile, maybe the water moves a little too easily through there. So you want to select something that helps hold that moisture for the roots so they have time to take it up and to get this recovery. So you kind of look at this whole plan of what you need to do. When it comes to the racetracks, I'm usually, because I have supplemental irrigation, I'm typically saying, I don't want to hold too much water. I want to push. Worst case scenario for me would be, I push the water and then I got to run water tonight, even though I just got a half inch rain. That would totally be fine. That's doable, right? So that's kind of how we want to approach it. And for me, when I came on board, the talk was, well, if you spit on Laurel, we're off for 3 days. That was the conversation. So it's like, okay, let's see what we can do and why. Well, the soils are not great, right? They tend to hold water. The track does not drain very well. That is a common theme in the equine industry. Every track that's built, for the most part, has poor irrigation and drains poorly. It's mind-boggling to me. So we're doing everything we can to help aid that. Use sound judgment. Don't water heavy tonight if there's potential to rain tomorrow. But once you start trying to guess what Mother Nature does, she's going to burn you every time, because that's my career. Mother Nature has been my enemy since the day I stepped in the turfgrass. especially in the Mid-Atlantic. She doesn't like it, but kind of always looking ahead. And some of the equipment that we'll talk about here kind of shows that. We're always looking ahead for whether it's fertilizer applications, getting those watered in, or, hey, we're racing on Friday and turf needs it, but it's Monday and it's dry, but we're looking like we're going to get rain on Wednesday. Let's ride through. I've gotten a few text messages from trainers saying, wow, that horse shouldn't have run that time. It's too hard. And I'm like, I know, man, we tried to play the rain and it got us. So we're applying water. But everyone's been good to understand it. How it's kind of like you can't win, it's lose-lose. Or what if I'd applied water and they saw that and then it rained and then now now we're off turf, right? So we play this game, but it's fun, even though it's extremely frustrating. So I mentioned the tools, right? Here's some this is just stick a broom in the ground. This is probably 6+ inches. This is Laurel. This one here takes a little bit of a wider sample. So when I do that, I like to get the turf in my hand or in the soil in my hands and tell the moisture that way. I also am going to observe roots. I'm going to observe how much thatch is here. This is when I first came on here. There wasn't a whole lot of roots. It wasn't the best. This blue thing up top, that's the pogo thing I was talking about. This is a moisture reader. So what this thing actually will do is stick it in the ground. Those tines on the end there, those 3 tines are about 2 inches long, 2.5 inches long. Stick it in the ground, grab my phone, open up an app, boom, hit a button, sample. It sends a magnetic little pulse through those things, and it'll tell me how much moisture is in the soil. That's a game changer potentially, right? Because now, if I have it in my hands, the issue is, first of all, you look at the turf and you go, that's dry, or that's wet, right? That's one. That's just the art. More art when you get it in your hands. You get the dirt profile in your hands. It becomes even better, more art. You can tell. Squeezing the thatch. Am I getting any water out? I'm smelling it. I'm looking weird out there. But these are the things I'm doing to try to get an idea. But now what we're doing here is, in the jockey club, we have 2 of these, one for each track. And so we'll stick it in the ground. The long probe on top gives me temperature. I can put it all the way down to 6 inches if I want to know. That's important to know temperature. As the soil gets hot, I might need to do this. We might be having stress periods. I need to prepare for it. But it's telling me, in addition to just moisture, it's telling me how much salt's in there. I can use all this information to help know I need to apply nutrients, stuff of this nature. Also, the technology, but one of the really cool things about it, I'm not sure if I have the picture of it in this talk or not, but it GPS maps everything. So when I'm done, I can pull up my phone and look, and I have the perimeter of Laurel and Pimlico circled out. And if I take 200 samples, they'll pop up in a color-coded thing, and it allows me to identify, turn one's a little dry, turn one's a little wet, right? And so it just gives us that level. And when I came on, and I cannot say enough about the management of the jockey club and their support of this. We're treating this like high-end sports service. I'm treating this like, it's the Orioles or the Ravens or whatever. Because once again, we're not talking high ankle sprains and stuff of that nature. We're talking life and death and multi-million-dollar, revenue, right? If something happens on the turf, there might be losing $1 million a day in your livelihoods, all the way from the breeder to the trainer, right? All gets affected. So this is very important here. And these are the tools that we're using now to do this, to map these things, to also, hey, it rained. What's the moisture level? Oh, it's 40%. Man, we ran on 40% 3 days ago and the jocks loved it. We're racing, right? And we're making these calls before 6 o'clock. We don't, so we're able to kind of do this stuff. We're making it not always, sometimes we try to race, it doesn't work out as well, but we're always trying to race on the safe surface. And I'll talk more about that stuff. Mowing, right? We talked about that. What height? Well, the highest height possible that you can do. When it comes to using high quality mowers, finish mowers, we may call them, it's hard to find one that might mow above 5.5 inches. So we mow at the racetracks 5 inches, 5.5 inches. A lot of, we're unique a little bit in that because a lot of the racetracks are moving to have like a warm season turf. And they might mow those at 2 inches. The Gulfstream will probably be mowing our new turf at 1.5 to 2 inches. So, the jockeys come here and they love it because it's like old school racing. Tall, cool season grass, 5-6 inches. They love how the horse feels in it. It holds together. If you were to grow a warm season turf at 5 inches, odds are it's going to be just a matty, gnarly mess. You're going to fight it. It's not going to look good. The cool season is perfect, right? If I can grow this and I cut it, and then it comes up and it matures and it just wants to kind of move together, and we'll talk about how to get it to move together. But 1/3 rule is try not to cut off more than 1/3 of the plant, right? Don't let it grow to be 15 inches and then hack the Jesus out of it. And the reason you don't want to do that is because you want that turf to always be thinking about the roots. You want it to not go into a mode of, holy cow, my entire photosynthesis network just got lopped off. I got to give all my attention to driving new surface roots, right? Or new turf. So if you chop it a little bit, it likes it. It likes that kind of cut. If you're not cutting it frequent enough, it kind of gets stale in a way. In my mind, I always want to thinking it's going to die a little bit. Just kind of keep it going, keep it recovering. It's releasing these hormones to recover. It's good for it. Also, if you're just mowing like 1/3 or so each time, you're not having those big clippings that are laying there, just killing the grass underneath, smelling horrible, getting hot, horse eats them. I'm assuming that's a problem. So all these things go in there. One nice thing to remember too about the racetracks is we're not grazing. So there's no grazing allowed, thank goodness. If you are, these sorts of things. Now, you might not have to mow, but you're rotationally grazing your horses through the pastures and stuff. When it comes to mowing, change the direction. Don't just mow it like Jolly Homeowner Company that mows the lawn every single day the exact same way, and you drive by and see it, right? Big ruts and hillsides. They're mowing it the fastest possible way to go to the next job. If you want to be serious about growing good turf, you're going to change as best you can, at least the tire marks. Racetrack's hard. You can't really go side to side and stuff. Golf, sports field, you're changing diagonals. You're doing everything. But in the racetracks, we're maybe mowing with one deck up or a push mower on the inside just to shift our tire marks. That's all we're looking to do. Because that's where you'll see the turf really get laid down. Make sure you have sharp blades. We're cutting the turf here, right? We're actually hacking at it, but we don't want it to be a major injury. Because once we're injuring the plant with dull blades, we're tearing it, you have the potential for increased disease pressure, but just overall stress, right? In the high-end sports turf world, we're going to possibly be spraying something that actually regulates the growth, keeps it from growing out of control. Those are great, as Jeff showed, in those spring months when it's like your home lawn needs to be mowed 10 times, your pasture's growing out of control, like you're not going to use this sort of stuff on pasture grass. You have to always think about grazing things in those cases. But on something like the racetracks, if we can kind of slow it down to where it can focus on roots, reduce clippings, then that's an option that, we're going to look into. General tools here. Maryland Jockey Club just got a weather station, and it's not like one you can buy at, the local store. It's high end where all the things it's sensing throughout the day are related to growing quality turfgrass. It's given us, everything from, how much sun it's getting. Obviously, we don't deal with a lot of shade issues at the tracks, but how much sun, it's telling us heat stresses, it's telling us humidity levels, and one of the most important called evapotranspiration, how much water is actually leaving the soil and the whole system via the plant. And that takes in a whole bunch of calculations of humidity and precipitation, all this dew points and all this stuff. We're looking at that number and it literally gives it to me in inches. So it says today we lost 1.5 inches. I say, okay, great. We got 2 inches of rain 3 days ago. I don't need to irrigate. We're fine. So we're watching these numbers all the time. And that's part of taking this to this whole different level, where we're combining it with that multivariable soil sensor, what we like to technically call that POGO, that moisture meter thing we're putting in the ground. So it's getting more penetrometer. We're looking at ground hardness with these sorts of things, sliding a hammer down and it's hitting this thing consistently and it's telling us how hard the ground is. Various other impact testers, shear veins, those are very big in sports turf to see how tough, how much force does it take before the turf tears up. That's very important if you're looking at an athlete pitching and turning and stuff like that. The OBST here is what's really being used heavy on the dirt surfaces to kind of, see how safe they are. It's this very high-end machine that's very simple in ideas, heavy weight with a hoof on it, slides down a known distance, known weight, and it simulates a horse's foot hitting the ground. We're looking at how can we move that onto the turf? What can that tell us on the turf? So, we're doing those sorts of things. But the biggest one for me is rider communication. We have text groups, but there's a handful of jockeys that I personally text and communicate or call and say, how did it feel? I mean, these guys and ladies are amazing at how their horses are responding, right? And it's important that I found a good group that doesn't blame the turf because their horse doesn't run well. You can't have that. Turf's horrible. It's too this, it's too that. Well, they finished, 12 out of 12, and that's the issue. I want people that finish 12 out of 12 and say the turf's perfect. Or it needs this, needs this. So we've really gotten into this communication aspect, and it's really kind of thriving, and it's key. It's important to have that because a lot of these changes can't be made overnight necessarily. So I need this constant communication. Additional practices, kind of looking at the bigger picture, everything in general. We've changed how we fill divots. Obviously, a horse goes in the ground, he makes a big divot. We've made sure that with the crew that they're only filling the divot. They're not just going boom, right? And so a divot like this isn't getting covered by this much dirt, which now gets really hot, starts to kill the turf around. Then they start to, join together. Next thing you know, you got huge voids, which was the case when I came on board. So the crew, I just can't say enough about the turf crew at the Jockey Club, how detail oriented these guys are. You only want to repair kind of what's damaged, and they're doing fantastic with that. If you're into jumping, think about where the jumps are placed. Don't put them in an area that's low that is going to hold water, right? Think about shade. Oh, it's so beautiful to have this jump right next to this trees. Well, where there's shade, there's usually poorer quality recovering turf. These are just things like sun seeker app. Oh, I think I want to lift here, and we're going to have a big event in September, and I think the jump should go here, but is it going to be shaded? Free apps, hold it up to the sun, tells you right where the shade is going to be on the day you pick. Mm-hmm. So there's all this sort of stuff that we use in the sports turf world. I love the fact that I use that at the golf course, but I don't have to use that at the racetrack because there's nothing shading me, which is just fantastic. So, but using all the tools, right? You have to use all the tools in order to produce the best turf possible. So now we'll go into just a couple little, actual case studies here about things that we've done with the Jockey Club, to show how you can properly apply these core principles, the agronomic principles that, give you great results. Cultivation, how you fertilize and seed and water and mowing, dealing with pests. So in Pimlico, fall 2021 was a little bit of a rough year. I think that was the year that, there were track issues at Laurel, and we were at Pimlico for a really long time. And quite honest, that track the turf track just can't handle that much abuse at Pimlico. It's just not big enough. You're looking at 8 acres as compared to 17 at Laurel. So that was a tough year. And that's when I came on board, was at the end of that. Like, what can we do? So first thing I did is we look around, we're doing soil tests, we're doing all this stuff we're trying to see, we're looking at the irrigation system. How much do the guys water? Oh, we can change that. How can we do that? One thing that we saw when I walk around is, as was mentioned, like there's just old varieties of tall fescue. It was pretty much all Kentucky 31. Kentucky 31's, pretty good for some things, right? Good pasture grass, sure. I think one of the end-of-fight free versions is now Kentucky 32. Mm-hmm. But there are other ones that are finding that are safer if you're into, for that stuff. That's obviously very important. But one thing that we kind of saw here, I was like, all right, we need grass that's going to fit this situation better. So let's reseed. And so we decided, all right, we're going to reseed. How are we going to go about this? Well, first we're going to do is vertical cut it, which is up top here. We're going to try to just thin this stand out as best as we can. One thing about Kentucky 31 is it does not love to be beat up. So I knew if we beat it up with verticutting, thinning it out, aerifying it, drying it down a little bit, that we could really ding it up to the point where we would get good establishment of the seed that we wanted. And when it comes to seed, I couldn't remember if I had it. So when it comes to seed, we went with something that we knew was going to grow really good in Maryland. So the seed that we chose was a high quality sod quality seed, they would call it. It was certified by 2 different states, Oregon, which is where the seed's typically grown, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I mean, they don't grow seed here, shocker. They would probably go broke. But it was high quality seed that was certified there. Then it comes here, and it's certain varieties that were on Jeff's list of things that would survive here. And we looked at them like, all right, we want, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go 90% turf type tall fescue, one of the newer stuff. But we need that sod knitting capability and recovery. So we're going to put some bluegrass in there, but we're only going to put about 10% in. So what we ended up doing was we broke it 30, 30, 30 to get to our 90 for tall fescues. 3 different varieties of tall fescue. 30, 30, 30. And then the 10% for the bluegrass, we broke into 2 5s. And we chose 2 different varieties of bluegrass. And things that we looked at for that were, summer pet, how is it for disease resistance and recovery, and color, and all those things. And Jeff does such an awesome job with the research stuff and having all it's so cool to go to the University of Maryland, turf stuff and just see these squares of all these different varieties of turf. And I can walk on and be like, hey Jeff, what do you think the shear strength is on that? Man, the density looks good. That might be perfect. So we can look at all that in the future, doing this stuff. So we wanted high quality seed. We wanted to do the right time. The right time, the issue with our timing was that we got pushed late in the year. So I don't think we started doing, I think this picture honestly was maybe early November. Yeah, I want to say early November, late Halloween time, somewhere right in there. And so, we did this, we thinned it out, the grass started coming up, the weather got cool, and, my wife can testify to the fact that I was almost physically sick for weeks because I was like, oh my, I just ended, this is a multi-million-dollar industry and I just killed their turf. Because the turf came up, but it was just it didn't come all the way through because we pushed so late. But I kept saying, I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. But I did one of the key things. That is, get the people that are good at their job also to come look at your place and then say, you're shafted or you're okay. Everyone that came out said, dude, there's so much seed. It is seedlings. It's great. Look at all the bluegrass that came up. The only way you get the bluegrass to come up is to thin the stand. That's really the only way. We needed it in their establishment. So we did it. And they all said, when you got a race on? First week of May, right? First week of May, I got to be racing on. Everyone okay, can you relax? It's going to be awesome. Look at what it became.
What time, when did you see?
So it was like right around Halloween. It was late. I wouldn't do it that late
You
ever
weren't
again.
worried about frost?
Yeah, I was worried a little bit about frost, but the key was like, if it's frosty, get off it. Like, don't ever touch it, right? Don't touch frost. I would never do that again. I would always do it now, mid-September. I would say mid-September is probably my favorite time.
Do you think Mother Nature was kind to you that winter? Because
Yeah, she was kind. It could have been a lot worse. But I'll tell you one thing that we did in this process is we threw everything that I knew with our fertility practices to get the soil to go. And, I'll talk here about carbon-based fertility. We just did everything that we could do to get it to go. I mean, I was literally spraying it every 5 days with a little bit of food, trying to get it to go. But I knew, like, as the year went on, I was like, all right. And you can see when I took this picture, like, this is, they're building, this is the prep for building for Preakness.
mm-hmm.
And the density was insane. It was just phenomenal.
How many pounds?
So I think we seeded at like 350 pounds to the acre. It was heavy.
per acre?
Per acre, which is 6
Not per
acres.
eating.
A lot of Laurel trainers refuse to go to Pimlico because they call the undulation in the turfgrass. They don't want to go there, it's not safe turfgrass.
Yeah, well, so we've had all that kind of analyzed. However, there are a couple areas on the back crossings that,
Is that what the crossovers are?
Yeah, for the move in the infield, that come up a tiny bit. We've been working on aerifying and removing that material to slowly lower them, to just over time. What they used to do was they would sacrifice a crossing to get everything moved in and out for after the Preakness, and then resod. Well, there wasn't as much care for that sod going down level, right? So that's what. But for otherwise, there is really none of like violent. Up the front stretch, it's uphill slightly. It is uphill going, it's not perfectly flat around. You can just stand back there and look and be like, oh, that's uphill. And then on the back stretch, it's ever so slightly down. But, I haven't been on it quite. The only spot that we're still kind of working on is the crossings. But and that's where the next section is here, the work we're doing on those crossings.
How tall is that?
That right there is 5.5 inches. And with all the stuff I'm spraying on it and the biostimulants and everything, that is no joke, pokes your hand. Like literally that stiff, pokey. And in fact, when we put the turf boards down, when they bring the gate across and we put the turf boards down, you have to have somebody hold it and then the guy jump on them. Otherwise they shift because the turf is so strong. So that's what you can do with the practices that we're doing. You can get your turf to look like that. Next one, here's these crossings, right? These great big mats go down because we bring cranes and trucks, semi-trucks, and everything in preparation.
What did you call that? What kind of mat?
It's just like a heavy-duty flooring, temporary flooring mat that we use for like a front-end loader to pick them up and move them. This actual situation here was for Moonrise, which is a big music festival that they have in the infield. So these are down in the summer when it's the time we want to be the nicest on the turf in August. And we got these.
How long is it down?
So these were rotating, here, every 30 hours or so, roughly. Sometimes we put them down at 10 o'clock when training ends, and then we picked them up at like 7 o'clock that night or something, and shifted. There's 6 crossings technically. So we would pick them up and they'd move them and they'd do this, but this is what's necessary because we don't have a tunnel that they can get the big stuff through. So this is like the ultimate, beast here. So this is what they look like when we're done and all move out, right? 26 days, Logan, we're racing. You guys need to figure out, can you recover this? Well, sure, we can do our best. And let's do what we can do. So what you have here is this is where the mats lay. They're not here in the middle really, and they're over here. You kind of see the big lines. So 3 crossings, 2, 2, 2, making 6, right? Total of 6 crossings. That's what they look like day 1 when we started this thing. So we're going to use the 8 steps, right, to success. We're going to core aerify. We know they're compacted. We got to start to relieve compaction. We're going to use that same great seed that we put everywhere else. We're going to do it again. We're going to use, my biggest thing, a carbon-based fertilizer, one that the microbes can easily use and break down to really superstart, that whole system. We're going to apply some additional soil amendments. Once again, ones that are carbon-based, ones that the microbes can really use. We could talk for days on the benefit of carbon. And when I say carbon-based, it's like a carbon-based organic sort of material as opposed to a synthetic NPK fertilizer that typically you're going to buy at Home Depot or anywhere. But it doesn't have any, as I see it, it's kind of a taker. It doesn't really give back to the soil. We're going to have to water these properly. We're going to use those biostimulant sprays that I said to help encourage the turf to handle the stress. And then wetting agent is another term for the surfactants to help hold the moisture or drive the moisture. And then finally, because I'm anal about things like this, we're gonna blend the color of these crossings. So here's, video's gonna play. This is me airifying, right? Normally I wouldn't airify a track with this smaller piece of equipment. If you're a turf guy, you gotta have a slow-mo verification. So that's what I have here. But first step, we're gonna use this machine, 3/4 inch coring time. We're gonna pull the compaction out of the ground, right? We're gonna remove it. It's all packed in there tight. We're gonna pull it out. See what, so that we can get the water in there, so that we can get the oxygen in there, so that we have a place for the new seed to go. So that's next, right? Seeding. We're going to seed heavy because we're going to drive density into this area of thin. Because you can see the soil when we pulled these, when these mats were done, you can see the soil. So we had to reestablish that. Use that same high quality seed. The same, seed that we used in the previous one, but we're also using it at Laurel as well, the 90-10. We're going to apply this carbon-based fertilizer, these kind of things. I made most of these slides are from a presentation that I gave to the Jockey Club, just to let them know this is the process that we did. I'm going to use these carbon-based, these forms. Mainly, I'm going to use this one here that has what we call mycorrhizae in it. It's a root beneficial fungi that is in some fertilizers. And what it does is it kind of colonizes on the root, and it really makes the plant amplify its root mass. And mycorrhizae is actually, if you really wanted to fall asleep tonight, you could just type that word in and learn that entire forests communicate via mycorrhizae under the soil you never see. It's like the coolest thing, trained like me. But that's what we're trying to do. We want this plant to communicate with the biology and the soil, all the nutrients that are there. If you haven't been using benefiting the soil and using, products that are going to help the bacteria help you, the soil is almost, I won't say dead, but it's just starving. Once you start giving it what it needs, it will break down all that fertilizer, all those nutrients that are there, and it will just thrive. And so, that's what we're starting here in this process. We need something that's going to provide nutrients for those baby seedlings. One of the things that's going to help is an actual amendment. This one has a product called zeolite in it. It helps hold nutrients, holds moisture. I wanted that because when we have baby seedlings growing, the roots are real small. So I wanted that extra, moisture held there. This material that I used is full of minerals. And that's vital. It's giving you all these micronutrients, all these little minerals that the plant needs to establish rapidly. Then we're going to water it really heavy, right? After I did all this, same day, plenty of chose, flood it. And the whole point of that is I wanted that whole profile, everything in that area, to not want for water. It's very important. You can't have water be a limiting factor if you want healthy turf, especially during establishment. And one of the things too here that, if the fertilizer is sitting on the leaf, it's doing you no good. I don't have time to wait when it's 20-something days. You got to get it down into the soil to where it's breaking down and it's starting to work, right away. So that's what we did. This is what it looked like after day one. End of day one, you can kind of see here, these are my seeds in my aerification holes. Once they're there, I start the clock. I better see that coming out of the ground within 5 days. I'm continually keeping it moist. But great thing about tall fescue, 5 to 7 days, there's baby grass coming out of the ground, and that's like crop pops or whatever. I get all excited. So the seed bed's primed, it has everything it needs right there. I've done everything that I could do at that point in time. We were just going to have to wait and keep it wet. 7 days, hard to see in this picture. This is all little baby grass coming at it. But what you can see, all this dead material, right? This is dead material. I left it there because it helps hold the moisture in a little bit, gives the seedlings a little protection. But, the last thing you kind of want to do is, in your mind, just say, I got to get all that out of there. So you'll rake it all clean. As soon as you rake it all clean, weeds say, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have bare soil. I can just take off. So I left it in there. The key is leave it in there until you get really good establishment. And then if you need to rake it out, you rake it out at that point. If it's really bothering you. Then once I saw these little seedlings come out, perfect time for one of the biostimulant sprays that I would do, and the one that I use all the time has a whole bunch of micronutrients in it. It's got things like molasses and things that the microbes can use really fast, things that take longer, bunch of elements. It literally has desalinated ocean water in it. So you pull all the salt out of it, but all the good stuff that's in ocean water is there. You ever go swimming in the bay and you get it in your mouth, you're like, oh, that's salty and gross, but then you try to tell yourself, oh, there's a bunch of good micronutrients in it. So I do this, but really I'm trying to stimulate this plant at a young age as well to handle stress and to give me everything it has so that we can do that. Day 6, you can already see the recovery, right? Each one of these recovery. Crossing number 2, a little bit slower. It was 95 degrees that day. It was down for a day and a half or something.
Some of that's the old grass coming back.
So some of the old grass is recovering, and that's part of the fertilizer and all that, right? We want that old grass to actually start to fill in as well.
I want to hear about the color.
Yeah, that's coming up. So at this point, we continue to water. Right now, I can't do much more. You just got to keep it watered. And one thing that I kind of noticed at this point in time is that around the seedlings, they were drying out a little bit too fast. So I got a product, one of those wetting agents, surfactant type products. It's a granular application. I'm able to just push it with the spreader. So, this product will last a month in the soil profile, and I thought, perfect. Within a month, we'll be good. So that gave me just that added level of control for the seedlings to get them establishment. One thing that's really important is most people, this is why you fail in home lawns or whatever with seed establishment. You let it dry out. You say it's up, you let it dry out, gone. You have to keep it moist. Not too moist, right? There's that whole thing, but this is important. We want to really keep this, level. Here you go. This is where we started. 26 days to go till racing. 2 weeks still to go. Mostly recovered. That's the benefit as well of doing this program, this fertility program, everything in general, because turf that is there has the ability to recover. And so, and this program kind of builds on itself. Every year it gets better, recovery gets better, recovery gets better. This is why we're at where we're at. At Laurel, docs say, man, there's so many races on this turf and it just holds together. They can't believe how it holds together and it recovers. And so it's this whole thing. We have the soil working for us now. Is the system perfect? No. Soil still doesn't drain very well, but we mask it a little bit with these other things. So this is kind of, where we're at here, 2 weeks out. In fact, I wanted to get a picture of these on day that we raced, but I don't think I did. So here's the blending color. This is it's hard to see in this picture, but this area here, this got heavy loads of some of the mineral products and stuff, which darkened the green. This was a little bit light in color. And when you came up to the crossings, it was like a lighter color and then it was dark lines. And I just don't like that for the horse's eye. I want, you want everything to be as consistent as possible, right? So how do we deal with that? There's a fertilizer that I was like, oh, I know the color of this. I know kind of how much I can put out. And so I did like just this, darken it up. And then I went on the edges here and I did like one pass and then I lightened the rate and I did another pass farther down and I lightened the rate. So I blended these into like 50 yards. And that was just the extra little touch. But that way, when they started racing, it just blended. Not as much like we do these sorts of, the products, but not the blending necessarily as much.
Will they continue to put those crossings in the same spot every year, or
Yeah.
will they do that?
Every year. And it just has to do with where the access points are. So we just did this again. This was last year for the festival. And we just did it again. But the good thing is we didn't have to do as much stuff because once again, the system's recovering. So it's been water mainly. That's where we've been at. Once again, great staff management of that one needs a break. We're here, we're here, we're here. We're moving as best we possibly can. We're scheduling, hey, it rained. You're not coming across the turf. Or, you got a 3-hour window, man, and they're coming up. And so the whole package has been great. So, kind of here, remembering the goals. What are we doing all this for? Safety, right? Those crossings were done for safety. They need to be repaired. We didn't want a horse coming across there and just being hammered hard on his hoof because it's been, compacted a bunch. We got to recover it. And we want this turf to be around. We're not sodding sections anymore. That's out of the window. Yeah, I know it's a pain that you got to be there to put the boards down and you got to be there to pick the boards up, but we're not sodding stuff anymore. So that's the changes we've done. And then aesthetically, it looks great on TV. But there's my information. Let's, I have texting preferred. You can ask everyone. I don't really like to talk on the phone, but it's also helps me just keep in touch, like who's talking to me or whatever. Because, I am by day golf course superintendent. I do this by night. I now oversee, the whole operation with the Jockey Club. Now we have Gulfstream in the mix. So there's just like lots going on. But you text me and I will absolutely help either myself or get you in touch with somebody to help do your stuff. Or if you have questions, that's the sort of stuff that I'm here for. Let's have some general questions and stuff. And if Jeff can answer, we
Is
answer.
there an efficient way to thatch 100 acre pasture?
Is there an efficient way to thatch 100 acres
Of pasture.
of pasture? No. There's a way, now there is equipment that you could really get after it and you could do stuff, but then you got to remove the material, right? So, I'm going to thatch this and I'm going to call my friend that does hay and he's going to hay rake it. That's an option. But in all this that I didn't touch on much, if you get the biology,
Do you think a hay rake would take care of that?
it could possibly, it wouldn't take care of it, but it could potentially erode your thatch material that you're pulling. In all honesty, what I would do is just aerify it a lot. I would just run an aerifier across it. You can buy one that goes on the back of the tractor, various sizes, 6 foot, 8 foot, whatever, different weights. One thing about this whole thing is, when you're doing a fertility program, and I'll say that like the fertilizer we're using at the Jockey Club, you're not getting at Home Depot either, right? This is high quality stuff. Most of it's composted chicken manure, but done in a certain way, and there's a lot to this. But when you get that whole system biology working, the biology will help break your thatch down as well. A lot of times, if you've just been using a synthetic fertilizer, boom, and then you say, man, I got to put 7 pounds of nitrogen down this year to get it to even green up. That's because the system is failing you. The biology is not helping you. One great thing about this is, okay, these products are more expensive. So we invest heavy in the front, but now we apply 2 pounds of N on something that should take 5 because it's so efficient. The system. My 1 pound of nitrogen application breaks down and acts like 2.5, 3 pounds of nitrogen. So that's kind of where we're at. You know, in the whole like system, you just kind of get everything going, but it will naturally break down on the patch. It will, as the biology works.
So I think this is a good segue into our open discussion, so I'm just gonna
Oh, we
pop out some